Wanted to take a few minutes today and give some updates on where we're at on our investigation of the in-custody death that took place this past Sunday. I know it's already been reported by the media, but we want to put out again today that the deceased's name in this incident was Mr. Zachary Anam, a date of birth of 3/27 of 1997. And as I think you all are well aware, he was pronounced on Monday morning. This incident, well, I want to start first off by reaching out to the family and expressing the condolences on behalf of the police department. Although we came in contact with Mr. Anam as the result of him being arrested at the mall, at the end of the day, we have a family that lost their son, a young son, while he was in our custody when he took his own life. And regardless of the circumstances by which we came in contact with Mr. Anam on Sunday, again, a loss of life, especially a life so young, is tragic. And our hearts go out to his family. Our victim services has been in contact with his family, and I too will make contact when I'm told the time is appropriate. But I just want to say again from the police department that our condolences are out to this family and our hearts are with them in their time of loss right now. The officers involved in this incident on Sunday were Officer Ivan Wall, who's been with the department for 10 years and 7 months. He was the officer that was transporting Mr. Anam, and his backup officer was Officer John Ricker, who's been with the department for 6 years and 9 months. And again, he was the backup officer, and he was driving the patrol car that was following Mr. Wall as they headed to police headquarters to try and positively identify Mr. Anam. We said on Sunday that we were working to identify who this individual was. We were unable to positively identify him. The officers were not at the scene of the incident, could not get a positive identification. They believed that they had identified him as an individual that had multiple felony warrants, and he in fact did turn out to be that individual. That was Mr. Anam, and he did in fact have multiple felony and misdemeanor warrants for his arrest at the time that this incident occurred. The weapon involved in this incident was a Glock semi-automatic .380 caliber pistol that was stolen in a burglary of a vehicle that occurred in Austin back in 2016. There's been a lot of questions that have come up about how could an individual that was handcuffed access a weapon and take their own life in a police car. I want to again confirm that Mr. Anam was handcuffed. He was handcuffed behind his back per APD policy, and he was seated in the back seat of the patrol car and seat belted in. So he was handcuffed behind his back. He was not handcuffed in front. He was handcuffed behind his back. What he was able to do, going back to the beginning of the incident when they transported him from the mall, it's all on video. Our cars record while our officers are transporting individuals that they have in their custody. Again, as reported, as they got close to the downtown area, he began having conversations with Officer Wall about suicide and his concerns that he was suicidal. Officer Wall again let him know that there would be services and counselors available to him at the jail, at which point he made a comment somewhat to the effect of he wasn't sure if he could wait that long. Our officer then inquired if he had the means available, and again, what you can see on video is Mr. Anam is able to pull his arms. Again, you can lean forward in the seat. He is able to pull his arms around the right side of his body, almost to the front of his body, and lay down in the back seat, and therefore he is able to place his head in front of the muzzle of that weapon that he had. So I know there's been a lot of questions of how can you accomplish that when you're handcuffed. And again, this is all on video. He was handcuffed behind his back. He leaned over in the seat, and he was able to pull his arms around to the front once he produced that weapon. I know there are a lot of questions about whether we had searched Mr. Anam. And although I have a preliminary belief based on where we are at in the investigation at this time, We have not yet interviewed Officer Wall, and it would be inappropriate for me to put any information out at this time because I do not want to influence his statement. So, but we do have a belief on whether or not he was searched, and then the adequacy of that search is what we will have to look at if as we go through this investigation. Once Mr. Anam had the conversations with Officer Wall immediately put out over the radio that the subject had a gun and exited his vehicle, as did Officer Ricker. And for several minutes, they were putting together a tactical plan. The SWAT team had been called, and they were working to keep the neighborhood safe. This was in the downtown 6th Street area. We had people that were walking. We had a bar that was in the background with glass windows. There were football games going on. It was crowded, so they were trying to take care of the safety of the patrons as well as focus on the incident that was occurring with Mr. Anam inside the police vehicle. As I stated on Sunday, this took approximately 5 to 6 minutes with Mr. Anam in the back seat, again with the pistol, at which point he placed his head in front of the muzzle and fired one shot. Again, this is all captured on video. Our officers put together a tactical plan to be able to safely approach the vehicle. They removed Mr. Anam and immediately began performing life-saving measures and asked for EMS to step up their response, realizing the severity of his injuries. So again, there are still questions that we are working through as we conduct this investigation, but we wanted to at least release today an update on where we're at with this case and what the next steps are. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Was he handcuffed before your officers arrived at the initial scene?
Preliminarily, I believe that he was. That's part of the investigation, though.
Was it the mall cops' handcuffs?
Thank you for bringing that up. This incident occurred at Macy's, and these were the loss prevention officers that worked for Macy's that had taken Mr. Anam into their custody. This was not the security detail that works for Barton Creek Mall.
Can you talk a little bit about the policy of when you do arrest somebody and take them into your custody, put them in the back of a police car? What is common practice? What are you supposed to do as an officer before they enter the car?
Sure. We have very strict policies that require that when you place an individual under arrest, you are required to search that individual. If you take custody of an individual that's under arrest from another officer, even if they have already searched them, you too are required to search them. So we have very thorough policies in this area.
Why is that policy in place? What is the reason?
Because of the importance of conducting searches to detect any contraband or other devices.
Can you talk about what areas you do search, legs, pants, just talk about what is the standard protocol when searching this?
Sure. I mean, the search is meant to be thorough, so you're gonna search everything. You're gonna start, you'll even start if at the top, working your way through the hair, down the back, down the front, arms, legs, everything, down to the boots.
What information was provided by the security officer to your officer upon arrival?
That's part of the ongoing investigation as far as that initial conversation. The parts that I have been made aware of is just the circumstances under which they found Mr. Anam. Obviously, he was under arrest for shoplifting at that time, and they were talking about the shoplifting and the evidence that they had recovered proving that he had shoplifted. And then our officers, upon that initial search, found controlled substance as well. That's why when we stated on Sunday he was under arrest not only for shoplifting, but also for possession of a controlled substance. We're still analyzing that substance, so I cannot tell you today exactly what that is, but we do believe that it was a controlled substance.
Was the loss prevention officer a full-time loss prevention officer, or was he an off-duty police officer for the state entity?
I believe he was a loss prevention, he or she was a loss prevention officer. I do not believe they were a peace officer.
And what type of mental health training comes into play when you have someone in your patrol car talking about suicide? What are the steps that you immediately go through, and was anyone else called for backup on the mental health end of this?
Crisis intervention team.
Sure. So what we had here, when the individual began talking about suicide, Our officer actually told him that when you get to the jail, there will be counselors that will be able to talk to you about that. And so we do notify staff at the Travis County Jail if we're working with individuals, bringing individuals into their care, custody, and control that we believe may be suicidal. And so he was giving appropriate responses as to what kind of treatment he could seek once he was booked into Travis County Jail and what type of counseling or initial counseling he may be able to receive.
Do we know what, if any, pat-down was provided by the loss prevention officer prior to Mr. Anam being placed under the arrest by APD?
I do not at this time.
For those who may not be familiar, that gun model that you referenced, what kind of size gun, handgun would that be?
It's a small framed semi-automatic pistol, and if you, I think if you just go out there and go on the website, you could pull a picture of it. But again, it was a Glock 380 caliber semi-automatic pistol.
In relation to size to like the one on your hip right now, is it similar in size to that, or is it?
No, it is smaller.
Is
And was it the loss prevention officer who cuffed Zach behind his back, or was it Officer, you say, Wall?
Officer Wall was the primary responding officer, the officer that got there first. I do not at this point have information on whether Mr. Anam was handcuffed prior to them getting there or not. Again, we still have a few more interviews to do at this point in the investigation.
Was it definitely APD cuffs that he was in?
I believe he was in cuffs that belong to APD. Our standard protocol when we arrive on the scene where either a loss prevention officer or a security guard has taken someone in custody is that we're going to switch those handcuffs out, just for a matter of we don't want to have to go back later and switch those out. So my expectation will be that they were APD handcuffs.
Do you know, are you guys looking into the manner in which he was handcuffed, whether it was correct or not?
So again, part of the, and let's talk about, the investigation is a bifurcated investigation at this point. We've got an ongoing administrative investigation that is looking into any potential policy violations, and then we have the ongoing in-custody death investigation, and that'll be the investigation that's being conducted by our Special Investigations Unit, and the results of that investigation will go to the Attorney General's office. So the questions that you're asking are absolutely part of that ongoing administrative investigation.
We'll take one last question.
Just from a base level at this time, is there enough information to show whether or not there's a breach in policy in the manner in which this arrest was handled by the responding officer?
No, I'll wait to receive a complete investigation with the benefit of reading statements from not only the involved officers, but also the security personnel that were involved and anybody else that might have information. So I cannot prejudge at this point.
Are they on leave, or are they still working on the streets as officers?
Both officers at this time are on administrative leave.
Can you spell their names for us before you go?
Certainly. It's Officer Ivan Wall, and that's IVEN WALL, and then it's Officer John with an H, last name Ricker, RICKER.
Can you spell the person's name?
Yes, it's Zachary, ZACHARY. Middle name is Kabir, KHABIR. Last name is Anam, ANAM.
Thank you.
Thank you all.